Is there something? No?
No, I'm just pointing.
Okay. Yes, live. We're pointing because we're live. We're here. It's Saturday. Welcome, everyone. I hope you're all pointing with us. Welcome to CASAA Live, everyone. This is the last live of the summer. For folks who have been tuning in for a while now, we take the summers off just because the sessions are done and whatnot, and there isn't typically a whole lot of big, exciting things happening in, July and August. Occasionally, some big stuff happens, and if it does, we'll be sure to let everybody know. But for the most part, things tend to quiet down this time of year. So we're going to do a little, like a kind of a recap, what's going on right now, things to kind of maybe still pay attention to over the summer, stuff like that, things that are coming up. And then obviously, at some point, hopefully, we I don't want to say obviously, I guess hopefully is the better term. We come back and recap anything, in the fall, anything that is big that happened. I see some familiar faces in chat. Skip, hello. Mischievous Makers. I'll get to you in just a second, Mischievous. I have hopefully some answers for you. Steve, Adrian, Ern, hello. Kithrin, hello. Welcome. Mischievous Makers said, how can I get something started to get old school stuff back? 70, 30, 18 milligram. As of now, after quitting in 2008, I'm about to go back to Death Stick since the throat hit and nicotine are lacking. Please don't go back to smoking. 18 milligram is definitely still a viable option. There's places to get it. I'm currently vaping 24 milligram freebase in the liquid that I use. It is still out there. It's harder to find, sure. The market tends to and kind of has always dictated or is dictated by what's most popular. Years ago, higher milligram freebase before the advent of nic salts hit the market. Those were much more widely available, and then nicotine salts definitely, kind of replaced a lot of those higher milligram freebases, but they still exist. They're still out there, and DIY is definitely still an option for people if you really are struggling to find those higher milligram freebase liquids that are going to satisfy you. We've done episodes on DIY in the past. If you're curious about those, you can go back through our YouTube and find them. We've spoken to people who DIY. There's a lot of really great information out there about that. So Tom is in chat. Definitely hit up Tom. Great buddy of mine. I love the Club Exhale, Tom. Thank you for that. Those are definitely viable options. It's still out there. Definitely not as common as it used to be, but it's still definitely there. Please don't go back to smoking. And definitely some great other answers going on in chat right now. But there we go. I just wanted to address that because I get it. Like, it's harder to find. I'm fortunate that I know somebody that makes a really great liquid that I love, and it's 24 milligram freebase, and it works great for me and my little pods and stuff. So I'm fortunate in that, but not everyone is as fortunate as I am in that department. So, all right, good stuff. Yeah, please don't go back to smoking. Anyways, Alex, it's about to be summer. Isn't that exciting? I guess technically it is summer already. The solstice happened.
It feels like fall up here today. It's actually from like last night, and now it's like gray and rainy all day. It feels like we're back, and we went from like heat wave to like, I think it was 40 something overnight. There was actually a frost warning up in the Adirondacks.
Wow. Yeah, so it definitely doesn't feel like fall here. It just feels like wet summer here. It feels like this is what June, like this to me is what June typically feels like. We went through the heat wave of like, August in the middle of June, which was just awful and terrible. But right now feels like June in Western New York. It's rainy. It's like 75-ish outside. This is typical Western New York June right now. So I'm like, okay, cool. But I know that next week it's going to heat up and just be humid, and I'm going to hate everything and just want to die. So it's cool. It's fine. For anybody else who works outside in humid environments, I feel your pain.
Yep. So
now that we've gotten the weather update out of the way, there's been some big things, and I have to be honest. And we had a conversation about some of this prior to the show. I'm not super great with like technical legal things. Most of the time I'm just like yelling in protest at dumb stuff that I think is dumb, and then half the time I'm wrong and people are like, Logan, shut up, that's actually a good thing, or shut up, it's actually a bad thing. So I'm going to rely on you kind of heavily for some of this because you have a better understanding of it, and I hope folks you're leaning on Alex right now as well, because I think there is definitely some confusion here. I was confused, and you laid this out pretty good for me earlier. We're gonna get into some of the Chevron stuff and things like that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I think I want to get some other stuff out of the way, because
That's what I was saying, but I think we have a few other
discussion.
topics to go through first.
Yeah. So I guess we'll kick it off with it is interesting. We're taking a break for the summer, as we do. We have our own lives to deal with, but also things do kind of die down. But not this week. It's been kind of a big week.
Yeah.
So on the 26th, so it was 3 days ago. What was that? Wednesday. FDA sort of unexpectedly authorized 4 menthol products. They're Enjoy products. They've got the Enjoy Daily that's offered in menthol 4.5%, extra menthol in 2.4%, and then the Enjoy Ace Pod menthol, just regular menthol, in 2.4% and 5%. These are officially the first flavored vapor products other than tobacco to be authorized. For those who might be new to all of this, there's a little bit of poetic justice here. Enjoy is the reason why we had vapor products on the market after 2010. They joined the lawsuit against FDA that was seizing shipments of products coming in from overseas, and carried that across the line. And
Enjoy was an independent company,
right,
for a long time.
Right. Yeah. This would have been more poetic justice had this happened several months ago.
I agree.
But now Enjoy is owned by Altria.
Yep.
So not so
Which
special.
I think it was 2020 or 2021, somewhere around there, that Altria acquired them, I believe.
Oh, no,
I could be wrong on
the
time.
2022.
Was it 20? Oh, okay. It was
Right?
later than I thought.
The Enjoy products were authorized in April of 20. I'm looking at a Tobacco Reporter article. Authorized in April of 2022, and then
so it's COVID. So like that's all just like one hazy lump of a year for me. Like that whole 2020 to like early 2023 is just 1 year.
Yeah. Kristen's typing some notes here. Jim McDonald does have an article about this. She propped that in the chat too. So definitely read Jim McDonald's work on this. But so yeah, we've got menthol products on the market. There's it's great, awesome. This is overdue. We should have had these products when they authorized all the other Enjoy products. Enjoy still has, I think, 2 other applications pending. One is blueberry, and I can't remember what the second flavor is, but fruit flavored type stuff. Those should also be authorized. I'm not a fan of blueberry flavored vape stuff, but
somebody out there is.
And it's going to help them quit smoking. So those products should be on the market too. But the sort of reading between the lines here, people should keep in mind that FDA is committed to banning menthol cigarettes. And so this is sort of going back to the statement, I think in 2017, where Scott Gottlieb had come out and said, look, if we're going to move forward with banning menthol, then people who smoke menthol cigarettes are going to have some place to go. And so now this puts them a little bit closer to, being in line with that statement, and not this year because it's an election year. And we'll get into how political all of that feels. But it's certainly probably, I would say, without regard for who the next president is, FDA is probably Center for Tobacco Products is probably going to try to keep pushing forward with a menthol ban. And if we've learned anything over the past, 8 years, it doesn't matter who the president is. There is no protection. It doesn't matter who your team is. The people are going to be convinced one way or another. And this is, I think, part of the larger strategy of FDA setting themselves up to pass that, or to enact that rule, to finalize that rule. Sorry, I'm using all different kinds of language here, to finalize the rule banning menthol cigarettes. So this is overdue, but it's, I think, also part of a larger strategy. And so, but hooray, we got flavors other than tobacco on the market. It helps us to some extent, you know, talking to state lawmakers who are just oblivious to, you know, what flavors are all about, where they come from, and how significant they are. So we now have flavors other than tobacco authorized for sale. If you live in New York State,
I'm hoping that this kind of, I don't know, opens, I don't want to say opens the floodgates, but opens the doors to other companies also having approvals for menthol. That's my hope right now. Is as much as I appreciate and, you know, respect Enjoy, I would hope that Enjoy isn't like the sole proprietor of menthol in the marketplace, you know.
Right. Well, no, and they're not, because there are companies that have received stay orders against marketing denial orders, right. Court-ordered stays, and so they are allowed, and it's not just menthol that they're allowed to sell. So there are flavors other than tobacco and menthol that are.
I just mean with like actual FDA authorization.
Right. Yeah. No, it would be good. I would imagine maybe they're going to wait for some post-market surveillance before making decisions. You know, they do have tons of pending applications for menthol and other flavors. So, you know, this could, I imagine, you know, what we know already.
Enjoy might be like the guinea pig for what comes next right now.
Probably. And of course, they're, you know, this is almost trial balloon status where, you know, I'm sure they're gauging all the blowback that they're going to get, that they are getting from this. The usual suspects have already come out and condemned FDA for doing these authorizations. So they may be just sort of taking the temperature and seeing, weighing all of the politics of this. So anyway, it's always good to start things off with some good news, and quickly moving along to some maybe bad news. I don't know. Do we want to, just for fun, run the legislative bumper?
Ooh, I can do that. Are you ready?
Yeah.
If you're wearing headphones right now, I'm so sorry.
I don't think it's as bad as
legislation.
So yeah,
we got for us.
It's relatively brief. So for those of you in North Carolina, you probably got an email from us. Wasn't this week, before the weekend last week. H900. This was a bill that had absolutely nothing to do with tobacco. I think it was sort of like continuing to recognize some college's men's program or something like that. I can't remember what it was. But it had, I think it passed the House, and then in the Senate, the PMTA registry language was inserted, you know, knowing that this bill is probably going to pass. And so the Senate adopted the amendment, and then it went back to the House for concurrence. And I think on Thursday or Friday, no, it was on Thursday, I think the committee concurred with the Senate amendments, and now it goes to the governor. And so a PMTA registry bill has passed the legislature in North Carolina. And now Governor Cooper has 10 days to take action, sign it, veto it, whatever. If this is, I think that takes us to July 6th, if you're just going 10 days from when it was passed. The effective date on this is May 1st, 2025. And that is when the directory is supposed to be published. And then there's a 60-day sell-through period following publication of the directory. So we have updated our call to action. If you live in North Carolina, please take action. Urge the Governor Cooper to veto this bill. It's too bad they packaged it with something that was probably of not much consequence, but the whole thing should be vetoed. It's North Carolina, so you know, there is a massive tobacco company in their backyard. I'm not going to give you the over/under on this, but probability favors that this goes into law. On the other hand, South Carolina beat back a directory bill. Perhaps well, almost definitely the tobacco companies were taking notes about the resistance they faced there, and waited until the last minute to insert this language in North Carolina and just get it done. So there are your legal wranglings, legal shenanigans that are happening in state legislatures over this nonsense. More about that later. And then the other thing to update folks on are the nicotine-free generation laws. I know we've spoken about this before, but it bears repeating. Massachusetts is facing sort of a municipality by municipality march that is common in Massachusetts, especially around tobacco regulations. We have 2 active calls to action, Medford, Massachusetts, and Reading, Massachusetts. They are looking at nicotine-free generation laws. This is what it sounds like. If you want to do the math, basically they pick a date. I think January 1st, 2004 is the current date. So anybody born on or after January 1st, 2004 will be prohibited from buying tobacco products
Ever.
Going forward.
Yeah.
It is that sort of progressive law.
So your buddy who was born a day before you will be your, cigarette purchaser or what have you, vape purchaser or whatever.
Yeah, so it's just kind of it's end game on steroids. This is a proposal that was shot down in New Zealand. It was shot down in England. It's just creeping prohibition, and it probably isn't going to have a different outcome from straight up prohibition. So
why
anyway,
is it always Massachusetts, man?
Well, consider the history of Massachusetts.
Oh, I know.
So that's why that was what it was explained to me as. Some things that are on deck for local boards of health in Massachusetts. Everybody's favorite town, Needham, Massachusetts, where we got that one study that was used to show the benefits of Tobacco 21. That was from Needham. And Newton, Massachusetts. These are, I think we're looking at a public hearing in Needham, possibly in the fall. I hope I read that correctly, because this actually did start last year, and something that we didn't catch. And discussions are ongoing in Newton, Massachusetts. I think on the call to action, there's 10 local boards of health have been talking about this. 4 of them have actually enacted these nicotine-free generation laws. So we'll see. It's another one of those things where it's just sort of like break things and see what happens, and see if the data pans out. I don't know that Massachusetts is going to care, but there you have it. So that's the legislative rundown for the week.
Super exciting stuff.
Yeah. It's
like the nicotine-free generation thing. It makes me feel like I felt when I was 20 and like asking my 21-year-old friends to go buy me beer because my birthday was next month, or you know what I mean? It's just like you're gonna be like somebody's gonna be 45 at some point and asking their 46-year-old friend to go get them a pack of smokes, and it's so absurd.
Yeah. So
New Zealand shot this down.
Yeah, one of the things and we've included this in the kind of pre-written emails that we've put together for folks. So one of the interesting things that was presented at E-Cigarette Summit came from Abigail Friedman. They're doing this policy analysis, and they're looking at flavor bans and raising the age of sale. And one of the things that they found in Tobacco 21, which was sort of counter to what we had expected, was that when they raised the age, the minimum legal sales age for all tobacco products to 21, the outcomes were good. You did reduce young people using the products. To some extent, it does, reduce the access that kids have to these products in schools. You don't have seniors who are 18
I was just going to say, I know the one
Yeah.
argument. Sorry, the wind just slammed my door shut. I know the one argument was really like 18-year-old seniors being able to go and purchase, and then they're still in the same school, in the same building, whatever, and then they become the I don't know, the dealers, if you will. And yeah, that Tobacco 21 kind of eliminated that.
So so they did find, there are positive outcomes, and this is coming from Abigail Friedman, who has done good research on the flavor bans in San Francisco and how that backfired, and how flavor bans are not actually achieving the outcomes that tobacco controllers want to see, but they have seen positive results from Tobacco 21. Happy to admit that we have a different view on that. It's not necessarily supported by this data. Our perspective was, we're agnostic when it comes to raising the age to purchase cigarettes, but this is a form of communication. This is a form of risk communication, and we shouldn't be lumping in safer alternatives with regulations on cigarettes. So, I think that's still something that should be discussed and debated. And I don't know where we have that sort of differential treatment based on risk in the country. But anyway, all of that to say, the research that went into the big study that was used to support Tobacco 21 shows that when you raise that age higher, 22, 23, 25, you start to see diminishing returns. So it's not reducing youth use. It's not reducing uptake of cigarettes or other tobacco products when you get above 21. And so essentially what these towns in Massachusetts are doing is just that. They're raising the age above 21. And so I think the expectation is, based on the modeling that was done to support Tobacco 21, is we will see at some point there are diminishing returns, that it's not actually reducing smoking prevalence or youth use of nicotine products. And this should happen probably within the first few years.
Sure. And once you're over 21, I think your access to the world just in general becomes greater. So your ability 16. To your ability to go out and get what you want is much greater than it is. There's a comment in chat about a 15-year-old doesn't care if the legal age is 18 or 21. I agree with you, Tom. When I was 15, it didn't matter to me what the legal age of anything was, but my access to someone who could get these products for me, or my access to these products in general, was different, and that was kind of the big sticking point of T21, was removing or making that access to youth, for youth to get these products that much more difficult. But once you're 21, you're older, you can drive across state lines, you go to other places where it is, you have better access to social media, chances are you probably have more money, you have the ability to order things legally or illegally off the internet. Like, all of those things become much easier for you at that age than when you're 15, 16 and you're asking a senior in high school to go, get you a pack of cigarettes or something like that. So
I'm going to answer this.
I see kind of the logic in that diminishing returns, because just as an adult, there's more workarounds for you. So you're still able to get those products.
I'm going to answer this question from Kennedy. It seems like all of this is happening in the East. Is there anything going on in the West Coast-ish like California? The answer is it's kind of already happened on the West Coast. California has a flavor ban, right? Yep. That happened years ago. You may not you may not see that because there are tons of informal sellers out there still selling all this stuff. But yeah, California was just as aggressive against these products as Massachusetts and New York State. Oregon, is it Oregon or Washington? Forgive me for not being up to date on all the court cases.
I believe it's Washington.
Washington had there was a court case, I think, that allowed a flavor ban to continue happening. I'm forgetting the county, but yeah, I mean, all three of them, Oregon, Washington, California, have been pretty aggressive against these products. And as far as California is concerned, it's sort of already happened. And
yeah, there are parts of California where just vapor products are banned,
right?
Not even just the flavors, but like the whole everything.
There are some municipalities that I think have outright banned tobacco products.
Yeah,
I forget which ones, but I want to say there's 2 or 3. So yeah, it's happening. It's happened for the most part in California. So, California, New York, Massachusetts, several states in New England, Rhode Island has a flavor ban. All the major population centers in Maine have flavor bans. New Jersey has a flavor ban. So it's all of that has sort of already happened, and they're kind of the usual suspects when it comes to yeah, exactly. You can still get anything you want in Southern California. Much is the same here in New York. I mean, if you know the right place to go, you can get what you want.
Yeah.
It's absurd, and they have this is to echo. I don't know if you watched a kind of a recap of e-cig Summit, or when we had Clive Bates on a couple weeks ago. He showed it's a brilliant pie chart that shows the American market, and you have this tiny sliver of blue, and that's all the products that have been authorized by FDA that are regulated, and then the rest of it, which is 98 to 99% of the pie, is all unregulated, and those are the products that have been banned. And so prohibition is not regulation. Doesn't surprise me one bit that you can still get products. This is one of those things, I think, we're kind of concerned about this because people still see that they can go buy what they want, and they don't necessarily see the effect of all of these regulations and laws. And so, convincing them that they need to get involved in contacting lawmakers or participating in, notice and comment rulemaking is difficult, because they're not actually feeling the effects of any of this. And I mean, the good news is that smoking is still coming down.
Yeah, the great news is that people are still vaping.
People are still quitting smoking.
Yeah,
at fast, at higher rates than was anticipated. So, it's a ridiculous situation that we're all in. But I mean, at the end of the day, as long as people are quitting smoking, that's kind of what we're all here for. So I'm glad that you can still get the products that are working for you.
That's been the trend, Janine. I don't know if it was just in conversation amongst us in CASAA, or whether we talked about it during the live stream, the 12-hour stream. But messaging in general, like I can't remember the last time I actually saw a quit smoking advertisement.
There's this. So we have the CDC Tips campaign, which is pretty narrowly focused on smoking. I see those pretty frequently.
For those that are just listening audio wise, Janine said, I can't help but notice there isn't a lot of quit smoking messaging going on. It's quit nicotine happening in Canada too. A Zoom last week with Health Canada involved talk regarding youth and nicotine not smoking. Yeah, I think it's like, this is the current landscape, right? Like everybody is so laser focused on, vaping and pouches and just nicotine across the board. That's what the messaging, that's the hot topic. Smoking isn't the hot topic anymore, Janine. It's we're still talking about, I don't know, bubblegum flavored nicotine. It's absurd. But yeah, I personally, I haven't seen a quit smoking commercial in what feels like years. But I still see truth advertising, the real cost advertising, and it's all regarding, vaping. And how every kid is still doing it. And so you shouldn't, as a youth, even though everybody's doing it and they make it look super cool in these commercials, you shouldn't do it. Yeah, and taxidermy, because that sends great messages.
I get it from both sides of the lake. I'm in northern New York, so my major media centers are Burlington. All of our news comes out of Burlington, so I get the Vermont messages. You have 802 quits, and then, which is not horrible, honestly. I think these other organizations could take some notes from 802 quits, but of course they have expanded to include, like, do you want to quit vaping? And for kids it is difficult, and they should have some resources. Sure. But and then I see the tips campaigns. I think New York State Smoke Free, whatever they're called, I think they've also gotten the message about stigmatizing campaigns. I'm sure there's some awful stuff down in the city, but I haven't seen much from New York State. that's super objectionable. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not great anyway. But in the tips campaign is still a lot of that fear and shame, but it's, you know, it's supposed to be real people's stories, and it is emotional, and it's not
Yeah.
condemning people. It's just sort of showing folks the actual downsides of, you know, decades of smoking, and those are pretty laser focused on smoking, with the exception of that one ad that misconstrued a woman's experience with switching from smoking to vaping and then going back to smoking. I think the original ad left out that she went back to smoking and then her lungs collapsed. So yeah, CDC is not great at this either. Anyway,
Yeah. And it's a good point Janine brought up. Yet Lindsay stated current data shows increase in youth now thinking smoking is less harmful than vaping, and that's just terrible. Yeah, we spoke to Lindsay during our fundraiser stream, and that was something that she had brought up, which, you know, we should probably just like give our youth like real information, like open, honest, real information about, you know, risks and you know, all of it. That would, I don't know, maybe that's just a wild idea.
Yeah, well, you know, somebody's going to need to science that to death before they do anything, and you know, I don't know that we actually need.
We're gonna need at least 30 years and a full meta-analysis to know if we should be honest with kids or not.
Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, Janine, of course, an important point here. The goalposts are moving, and now we get into talking about endgame, and just to you know, restate, I think something that Mitch Zeller brought up at E6 Summit this year is, you know, we've got kind of two scenarios here. One is, you know, what world do you want? Do you want a world free of nicotine use? Or do you want a world where people are choosing the less harmful nicotine products and we get rid of smoking? And among the audience and the panel, and even I think from Mitch Zeller himself, you know, people were pretty much in agreement. We're looking at, we want a world where smoking goes away and people understand how to use nicotine in a less harmful way. That seems to be the ideal outcome, at least from the harm reduction side of things. But that's not where all of the campaigns are going. They think they're going to get rid of nicotine completely. And of course, their big, you know, effort here is to stick it to tobacco companies, and hit them in the pocketbook. Well, if that was really the way they wanted to go, then they probably should have done more to defend the independent vapor industry, because that was actually putting a dent in cigarette companies' market share, and continues to do it. I mean, this is why we have the directory bills. This is tobacco companies defending their market share, defending their share price for their investors. It is not about public health. It's not about public safety. It's about the fact that, you know, these products with ranges of flavors and nicotine strengths are continuing to cut into their market share. And that's because that's what people want. So yeah, they could have gone a completely different way with this. I'm sure there are several people in this room who are manufacturers or vape shop owners, and they knew what they were doing in taking the fight directly to tobacco companies. And you know, the playing field is the market. It's not legislatures. And we're the ones making it happen. Consumers.
Amen to that.
Yeah. So yeah, I think maybe we're at the point to have that uncomfortable conversation about the Supreme Court.
This is what I've been looking forward to, because again, I get lost, man, in the legal jargon understanding of things. I get really lost. And so you did a great job at kind of bringing me up to speed on this. So I'm going to lean on you as far as the whole Supreme Court and Chevron and all of this goes, not just necessarily like how it may affect us in regards to vapor products, safer nicotine products, and consumers here in this space, but kind of just broadly as well, because this isn't maybe what everyone right now kind of seems to think it is.
Well, no, I think a lot of people understand what's going. I mean, especially the people who are close to this. There is a fight in well, not just the United States, but there's a fight here about regulation, and some of it is overbearing. This idea of like one size fits all regulation, not specific to tobacco products. This is across all industries. And one of the big complaints against regulatory agencies is that they will enact regulation intended to deal with larger corporations, but the smaller folks who maybe don't meet those thresholds, they certainly don't have the kind of money that the big corporations have, they're getting the shaft. The best they can hope for is to maybe be absorbed by one of these larger companies, and then everything that they've worked for is hopefully they get compensated for what they've built, but that's not what a lot of people want to do, and so there are people losing their businesses. There are people who are not able to make a profit, when they comply with certain regulations that weren't designed for them, and we've seen this in tobacco and nicotine, obviously. The Tobacco Control Act was written for and by tobacco companies who were selling cigarettes. And the Tobacco Control Act was intended to rein in the tobacco companies, not just, deal with, product standards and all of that, but weaken them in terms of their ability to lobby states and the federal government, and also hold them accountable, all of the things. But unfortunately, this catches up all the smaller manufacturers who can't subsidize their pre-market applications with sales of cigarettes. They don't have the money to get through the process the way that tobacco companies do. And so that's why we've seen a lot of companies exiting the market. And then, of course, if you're a vape shop and you can only sell the now, 27 products, 20 of which actually contain nicotine, that's not enough to run a vape shop. You're going to have to do one of those hybrid smoke shop places, which, by the way, are not exclusive. They're not their own standalone buildings anymore. They're in gas stations.
And some of those authorized products aren't even distributed anymore.
Yeah, they suck, and they're outdated.
They're not even out there anymore.
Even if they were on the market, people wouldn't buy them. So that's not a good way to run a business. So anyway, what I've got a foot on both sides of the line here, and I am trying to navigate this without committing CASAA to a particular position. So when we're talking specifically about the tobacco and nicotine regulations, everybody who's been following this conversation that FDA is behind curtain. We don't have a good idea of exactly what they're doing when they're reviewing applications, and it's still kind of a mystery what FDA actually wants from companies in their applications. Even though they've published guidance, they've published this, what I've referred to as like the PMTA style guide. And of course, we have all of the events that happened in 2020 with companies submitting applications and then finding out later that, they either didn't need to spend some money on a bunch of studies, or they didn't do the studies that FDA now wants, goalpost moving, the surprise switcheroo that happened.
The switcheroo.
And the fatal flaw decision or fatal flaw strategy. Oh, they had a thing. It has a name. All of this stuff that FDA did with these applications falls under that arbitrary and capricious designation that the courts have given it. And so I want to start this off by saying one of the most unfortunate things that has happened with FDA regulation of safer nicotine products is that all of this is ending up in the courts. Let's be abundantly clear. There are two policymaking, or I mean, the courts aren't really policymakers, but there are two entities involved in this fight that are not science and data driven, and that's the legislature and the courts. courts, judges are not scientists. They're not regulatory scientists. They're not epidemiologists. They're not toxicologists. I don't even know if they've ever used a tobacco product. They're experts in the law. That's it. They really don't have any business dealing with regulation. They can tell you whether or not the regulations are consistent with the law, but they're not going to come up with, for example, product standards. That's up to the regulator. And so to have all of this decided by people in black robes, I don't think is the best way to go about this. I would rather see FDA handle this in a way that considers all stakeholders, properly weights youth use and adult switching, and we can get to and do it in a way that is transparent and accessible to people. We need to understand what's going on as consumers. We deserve access to understanding how this process works. And so far, FDA has not really delivered on that. I will say, I'm going to jump around here. Forgive me. This is all very much a work in progress. And I'm not an expert on the Supreme Court, so don't hold me to any of this. I will say I've been thinking about this week because we also had a TPSAC meeting on Wednesday. I think that was the thing that I didn't put on the list that I wanted to touch on. But so taking it back to TPSAC, which is still relevant to all of this, Swedish Match had a modified risk order renewal hearing at the Tobacco Product and Scientific Advisory Committee. This is because modified risk orders are not chiseled in stone. They come up for renewal, I think, every 5 years. Much like pre-market tobacco applications are not chiseled in stone. You still have to do post-market surveillance. You're going to have to report back to FDA. They want to go over things like, are kids using your product? Are people being injured? People getting sick? We need to see all this data if we're going to renew your application, et cetera, and so on. And so Swedish Match, Swedish Match is the first company to get through PMTA and modified risk. And I think I forget which year it was. Was it 2018 or 2019? They got it would be 2019. They got the authorization for making modified risk statements. And at the time, I was at the hearing. It sounded like their marketing plan was very, very limited social media, only on Facebook, because I think at the time Facebook was the only platform you could age gate things, and then direct mailers. And I don't know if it was going to be on the packaging. I don't think it was going to be on the packaging. But the statement is, switching, using General snus instead of cigarettes can prevent you developing, lung cancer, heart disease. I don't know if heart disease is on there, oral cancer, all of these things. You're at more risk if you smoke cigarettes. So you're less likely to develop them. And I think some of the discussion on Wednesday was, the statement doesn't say switch completely. It just says use instead of. People understand that. To give you my description of a TPSAC meeting, a TPSAC meeting is an entire day of listening to very smart people take all the joy out of language. It is absolutely brutal. And it's at times insulting. But as it turns out, Swedish Match's modified risk statement is buried on their website. In order for any consumer, anybody, to see this modified risk claim, you have to go to the Swedish Match website, create an account, have your age verified, and then you can log on to Swedish Match's website. And you look over on the left-hand side of the page, and you can navigate down a menu and click on modified risk statement. And then you can see it. It is not something that is just out in the world educating people about relative risk, about the continuum of risk, about safer products compared to cigarettes. It is buried on their website. The other thing that was interesting to note was that sales of General snus have been going down since they got this authorization. Again, if people aren't exposed to the modified risk statement, it has absolutely no bearing on your sales. Swedish snus is typically not something that Americans like. Our palates, we like sweeter things. most Americans, this was something that came up in, focus grouping around the Camel snus modified risk order or modified risk application, which they don't have, they withdrew that. But when they were asking people, their impressions of Camel snus, people said, oh, it smells fishy. That's the salt that's involved in pasteurizing and making snus. It's not part of, I don't think it's part of the pasteurization process, but it's part of the salt is an ingredient, not nicotine salts, but I'm sure nicotine salts are used. This is like straight up salt that's used in processing. So it does give it a salty, fishy taste. It's not fish, it's just salt. But that's not something that Americans are down for. So we like sweeter things. It doesn't matter what age you are. If you're an American, you like sweeter things. This is just food science. I've known, my dad worked for a candy company, so I know, I've known this since I was a kid.
Look, I like that savory tobacco umami,
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy it too. I recently bought some nicotine pouches that were clearly not designed for the American market. I don't know why these people are selling them, but it still has like the Swedish text on it. The warning is in Swedish. It doesn't have the English warning that's required on all smoke-free tobacco products in America. But the flavor is different. It's not just mint. It's got something that's actually designed for, the European market.
Sure.
So anyway, it's not a big surprise that General Snus has not taken off in the United States. I've tried, other brands, Camel Snus, of course, Skoal Snus, and they are much, much sweeter, much more flavorful than General Snus. It would have been nice to see what effect the modified risk claim had on sales, but I don't think we can get that because it was just buried on their website.
Right. If no one sees it, then it's almost irrelevant.
Right.
I mean, it's not necessarily, it's not irrelevant, but to a consumer that doesn't know it exists, it's irrelevant.
Yeah. They don't know. They haven't seen it unless you go to the website. Our contribution to the hearing was we want to see the messaging expanded. This needs to reach a wider audience. I mean, honestly, it just needs to reach any audience at this point. In particular, I gave the example of where I live. I live in northern New York, north of the Adirondacks. This is a low income part of the state. This is, grizzly and pickup truck country. Grizzly as in grizzly smokeless tobacco. Smoking prevalence is higher here. Youth vaping is higher here. Those are things you would expect from low income communities. And so these are the areas that need to see that message about the continuum of risk and encourage people to switch to safer products. But you just don't have it here. I don't think there are any retailers selling General Snus. Certainly, I don't know about in my county. Certainly not in the city. It's very difficult to imagine people actually getting exposed to that message. I haven't seen it in conjunction with Copenhagen, but compared to pouches of Swedish snus, Copenhagen is very difficult to use, arguably disgusting, and not very pleasant. I have used it just to try it out. I didn't like it. I'm not making a judgment. If you can get by with Copenhagen, stick with it. It's better than smoking, and they are allowed to make modified risk claims. So hopefully more people are seeing that. Some of the other discussion was sort of like, how do we prevent the halo effect? And to be honest, like, you're just splitting hairs. This is, we want the halo effect. We want people to see a modified risk claim for one smokeless product and say, oh, well, I bet these others are also low risk. Maybe if I don't like the flavor here, I can try something else that's a smokeless product and reduce my risk. That's totally valid and should be happening. And I despise the fact that there are people on TIPSAC trying to figure out ways to limit people's access to the truth. So, bringing us back to the Chevron decision and how FDA has really bungled the tobacco regulations. And what I was talking about going into this is, so there are sort of two, I don't know if you would call them epochs or eras that we are seeing right now with the Center for Tobacco Products. You had Mitch Zeller, who oversaw kind of the first 10 years of, more than the first 10 years of FDA Center for Tobacco Products. He was the first director, and their task was to implement the Tobacco Control Act, develop the regulations, communicate that to manufacturers and the public, and regulate tobacco products. And so that was just a little over 10 years of Mitch Zeller's leadership at FDA. And it's still the case that if you ask anyone from FDA about the regulations or changing the regulation or, making it better or whatever, the standard response is to recite the Tobacco Control Act back to you, which is unhelpful. It is not useful at all. It is their job to interpret that law and make it understandable to both industry and consumers. But for many years, we didn't really get that. You're going to have to go read something if they put it out there. But for the most part, they're sort of very strictly, literally interpreting the law as close as they possibly can. I think I'm starting to see that change a little bit. Brian King is still reciting the Tobacco Control Act in response to questions, but now FDA is taking these recommendations from Reagan-Udall Foundation and working harder at stakeholder engagement and transparency. These are absolutely vital for any regulator. This is not specific to FDA. And so what we imagine that looks like is more public meetings. There should be at least one meeting, an annual meeting where all stakeholders are, listening sessions, basically. I don't know if it's better for FDA to pick a topic. For example, several years ago, FDA had a listening session about therapeutic products that might be available for minors. Right now, nicotine replacement therapy and I think prescription drugs intended to help people quit smoking are just not available for kids. I don't know if doctors can actually prescribe NRT for young people. So none of those FDA approved products are approved for under 18 use. So they held a listening session about how do we change that? What other strategies are available? What products? What do we need to consider if we are going to authorize NRT for young people, and so on? So that's a very specific kind of public, listening session with FDA. But I think, an annual and a more extreme case would be quarterly. There are conversations about rapid response. The regulator needs to respond to the ground. Things need to be able to do it quickly and efficiently. We shouldn't have to wait 3 to 5 years, for example, for FDA to kind of right the ship when it comes to people's perception of risk associated with nicotine, which is what we expect to be happening. It could take 3 to 5 years for FDA to do all the science needed to come up with corrective statements that will realign people's perceptions of risk. We don't need to go through that. And of course, my suggestion to FDA, and I think other people should suggest this as well, is to just stop promoting misinformation.
Yeah. Or just asking kids which words sound scarier.
Yeah, it's not helpful. It does end up in front of adult lawmakers, maybe not by the hand of FDA, but all of the campaigns are taking that information and presenting it in committee hearings all over the country. And there are adults who are wildly misled about all of this stuff, and it's a huge problem. And the easiest thing that anybody can do without any research is just stop doing it. Stop spreading the misinformation. So, and there are already people. Andrea Valenti gave a presentation at E-Cigarette Summit about corrective statements that they're researching to see whether or not those statements realign people's perceptions of risk. It looked like they had some positive outcomes there. So the research is underway. And there is some promise there. So anyway, all of that to say, these are things that we want to see continue happening in the way of more transparency, more stakeholder engagement. Let's get all of these voices, bring everybody to the table, and let's hash out how we can make the regulations better. That is the appropriate way to go about this. And FDA is the forum to do that. If necessary, and it may be, we will have to go back to Congress. And one of the points that I made at E-Cigarette Summit and will continue to make, and I think we've been making over the years, maybe not so clearly, is if FDA, if state lawmakers, if your local governments are going to keep saying things like, well, this sounds like an issue with the Tobacco Control Act, well, we have to go to Congress. We are going to have to change people in Congress, change their understanding of nicotine and tobacco. They need to be updated on the science. They're not getting it from Matt Myers isn't a part of Tobacco Free Kids anymore. They're not getting it from Tobacco Free Kids. They're not getting it from Truth Initiative. Cancer, Heart, and Lung are not doing all of this education that we need to have done for members of Congress because they have a different view of how things need to play out. They want to destroy tobacco companies. They think that's the best way to improve public health. They're wrong. And so, we're going to have a concerted effort campaign of our own to educate lawmakers about the continuum of risk and how to more properly regulate safer nicotine and tobacco products. We change the law, and that changes the regulations. It changes how FDA does things. That's the process. And that process requires changing hearts and minds and getting buy-in from all the other stakeholders. What we're likely to see now is, because this Chevron deference has been overturned, companies are going to be able to sue FDA over their interpretation of vague language. And it sounds like the courts are going to be able to make this decision. They have options, right? You can side with the regulator or you can side with the law. The court, of course, the judiciary is responsible for interpreting the law. That is their job. And so I'm not exactly sure, note for note how this is going to play out, whether or not, the Supreme Court would be able to say flavors are okay, or here are numbers on how to properly weight youth use versus adult switching, which again, that's something that factors into the appropriate for the protection of public health standard. Well, if it's a standard, it should be a standard. If it's just weights and measures, give us the weights and measures. But we don't actually have that. We have this sort of vague talk from FDA that sounds a lot more like zero tolerance than it does a standard where we are considering the fact that there are always going to be people who use drugs. There are probably always going to be people who use nicotine. What is that number? What is the acceptable number in terms of good for public health? We just don't have that. And so now it sounds like we may be leaving that up to the court, who, by the way, are not scientists.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's, to me, it's kind of like it's you're building your house on sand. It's not a bedrock foundation here. This is something that, you're leaving it up to the whims of justices. It's not backed by science and data. Even if it turns out to be good for the industry, there is still that question of whether or not it's going to be good for public health. We maintain the position that, access to these products is what we want. It's what we need. People's awareness of the continuum of risk is going to attract people to safer nicotine products away from smoking. That's what we want. And if that's how the Supreme Court comes down on this, then we expect that to be good for public health. But again, it's not really building a solid foundation. Depending on the makeup of the Supreme Court, which I guess isn't likely to change that much over the next 20 to 40 years. I think, the next president, I think, may have 2 appointments in their pocket. So it's possible we see something shift. But, again, there are politics in the Supreme Court. And so it depends on which way the wind is blowing. that's not a solid foundation for making
Right.
good regulations.
Yeah, that's not evidence-based and science-driven.
Right. And so,
It may come down to something that just ends up being more politically driven than anything else.
right. And another way to look at all of this is a workflow and workload issue. So I know that, people hate overregulation. I'm with you. I think there are a lot of regulations out there that weren't properly considered. They didn't properly consider all stakeholders. They put good people out of business who, weren't doing things that were wrong. It just didn't match up with the regulations, or they couldn't afford to go through the process, whatever it is. And I'm not just talking about tobacco. This is all industries, all areas of life. There's a regulatory agency for that. But just to give you sort of a visual example, the FDA has a campus filled with thousands of employees, people who have gone to school for regulatory science, toxicology, epidemiology, whatever it is. They're
all
bringing
the ologies,
all of the ologies. They're bringing all of that training and expertise into that campus to make decisions about language coming from Congress, by the way, not a science and data-driven body of decision makers, so that they can craft regulations that hopefully work for most of the industry, most of the public. They're never going to get it right. We're never all going to be happy. Just get over it. The weather sucks sometimes. That's just the world we live in.
We have a country of 330 million plus people. You can't make everyone happy. You just can't.
Even if we had 5 people in this country, somebody's going to be unhappy about it.
Somebody.
It's just how it works. And
somebody's going to be Jim in the board meetings and just vote no.
I will tell you right now that, the overturning Chevron is not going to create some sort of libertarian utopia. It's just not going to happen. People are still going to be harmed by industries who are doing irresponsible things. It's just now they're more likely to get away with some of this stuff. That's kind of what this ends up being. And again, I've got a foot on both sides of the line here. Regulatory agencies haven't done themselves any favors. Anytime you hear somebody talking about, trying to enact this one size fits all policy, that's the regulator not considering all the stakeholders. And there are people who are harmed by that. And I think it really comes down to, there's a lot more work that needs to be done in order to craft regulations that serve people. And I'll go back to tobacco again, because that's just where I've been for 10 years. When the deeming regulation was open for comment, I keep thinking AMSA submitted this comment, but I'm not sure. Somebody had a comment. I haven't been able to track it down since. Admittedly, I haven't gone about it with any diligence, but there was that suggestion that just like with cigars, there needs to be sort of option A and option B in terms of regulations. And I think for the cigar industry, the second option was to make a distinction between premium cigars and everything else. Premium cigars are anything that cost over like $20, and they are typically sold in cigar stores where you have to be, in a lot of places, you have to be 18 or 21 or older to enter. First of all, they're expensive, so kids aren't buying them. No kids are out there buying fancy cigars. So subjecting these premium cigars to regulations intended to rein in cigarettes doesn't make any sense. There's no benefit to youth. There's no real benefit to public health. Let them sell premium cigars to anybody who's of age. It's that simple. And they shouldn't have. We know what a cigar is. It's tobacco rolled up in tobacco. You smoke it. It smells gross and it offends a bunch of people, but whatever, people enjoy it. It doesn't matter. They shouldn't have to go. Not to mention, these are craft products, right? Like the crop might.
I'm just sitting here thinking about how much I enjoy the occasional cigar still.
Good on you. Depending on who you are, a cigar smells like freedom. I'm here for that. Fine. But, from year to year, that tobacco crop might be different. The nicotine content might be different. The nicotine tobacco-specific nitrosamines might be different. Different compounds and flavors might be different. And you shouldn't have to, essentially, you're making a new product. Or you could be doing something that's seasonal. So should these small craft cigar manufacturers undertake a multi-year, multi-million-dollar application process to sell, I don't know how many thousands of cigars that they're going to sell that season? It doesn't make any sense. They're not going to make any money. and they're not going to be in business. And quite honestly, cigars aren't a problem with youth use. If you're over the age of 18, you're an adult. You deserve to make decisions about what you put in your body. If you want to suck on gasoline, that's your right. Don't do it, but that's your right. So anyway, that was
to anybody out there, please don't suck on gasoline.
Yeah,
but he's not wrong.
Don't do that. But so that was a recommendation during the comment period that, you know, premium cigars should be regulated differently than other cigars. And there was similar thinking in the vapor space drawn across similar lines. You've got your, you know, pod systems, your single-use products that are appropriately sold right next to cigarettes in a convenience store. CASAA wants those products. We want vapor products, nicotine pouches, snus, smokeless tobacco featured prominently on the power wall in your gas stations and convenience stores. They should be competing head to head with cigarettes. People should have to search to find their brand of cigarettes. They should have to look past all of the safer products to find their usual brand of cigarettes. We want that. But because of the environment in which they're sold, which, yes, kids walk into convenience stores, those products need to undergo perhaps a more rigorous review process. For open system products, for your more expensive pod products, open bottles of e-liquid, all of that stuff, the review process shouldn't be so expensive and strenuous. There are certain issues, of course. You know, I mean, the big issue was if you're going to sell bottled e-liquid, in order to satisfy the regulations, in order to get through PMTA, you know, the thinking was you're going to have to test this bottled e-liquid on every imaginable configuration of an atomizer. It's not impossible, but it's impractical and very, very expensive. And so the likelihood of FDA authorizing something like that based on what would be limited research is slim to none. There are people, I have talked with people who have, you know, pending applications. There are obviously companies out there who have received stay orders, court-ordered stays against marketing denial orders, who are selling open system products. So it is possible at least to get an application in. But the idea of FDA authorizing open system products, nobody's ever really had a whole lot of confidence in that happening. So the argument being that there should be two tiers of review, what's required.
Things that are sold in a specialty vape shop would be like the equivalent of the premium cigars sold in a humidor at a cigar shop. That would be kind of the difference.
Yeah, considering the marketing plans and the retail environment in which these products are sold, the path to market for open system products should be easier. And so I went off on a tangent here, but and I've completely lost. How does this relate to Chevron? Well, that is something that, you know, to fix that, unfortunately, we can have it done by, you know, people in robes who aren't scientists, or we have to go back to Congress for people in who also scientists. They don't have the authority to do that, or they're unwilling to do it. FDA denies that they have such authority to do this on their own, and so we have to go back to Congress. One way or another, we're probably going to have to go back to Congress. I think, you know, when it comes to ambiguous language, again, I don't know that the court is going to be able to establish thresholds. I don't know that we're going to get standards-based regulation through the Supreme Court. And to be perfectly honest, none of those justices are qualified to establish that. So it's you know, it's not like you're going to have sit-down meetings with, you know, the chief justices to figure out what the appropriate, you know, percentage of flavoring ingredients is going to be in your e-liquid. That's a conversation for the smart people at FDA.
Yeah.
And so anyway, there are pros and cons to this. A lot of the folks who are talking about undoing Chevron, it's a lot of bad stuff. And I think, broadly, there are regulations out there that do protect us, that we do benefit from. We don't see them. I don't know them. I don't have a running list of, it's something like 18,000 cases around regulations that are now sort of in jeopardy. Everything from environmental protections, labor protections, education.
And the
If
fact
there's
that
a building for it, there's a regulation affected by this.
The fact that we don't know about it or think about it is probably a sign that those regulations are working in a good way.
Yeah, they're
the fact
working.
That we go about our daily lives without having to be massively concerned with, certain things around us is probably an indicator that those regulations are working as intended and are a good thing.
Yeah, they're working for us, but they're challenging companies' profits. And that's really what this comes down to. This really is an example of corporate profits versus health and safety of the public. And that's why, you have people screaming for, just deregulate everything. There are, of course, one perspective. I know Carl Phillips wrote about this, back in the day when people were talking. I mean, it's not even really that far back in the day. We've heard people talking about like the Wild West of vaping. Well, in the Wild West, you didn't necessarily have codified ordinances that described what you could and couldn't do. There was more of that sort of street justice vibe. But they did take care of things. And so it's not, it's not as bad of a thing to refer to, to think of, regulation in that Wild West scenario. Things actually kind of worked out under that. I'm not doing the blog post justice. Go to anti-THR lies and track it down. I think if you just search for Wild West, you'll probably find Carl Phillips's thoughts on this. But it's a good piece if you can sift through he's got very, very dense language to talk about this stuff. But that's another perspective on, just how necessary a lot of these regulations are. I'm not going to fight anybody over, the existence of overbearing, one size fits all regulations that are out there. I agree. I'm sure of it. That's the problem with having people in ivory towers making decisions for the rest of the country. They sort of look at things through that lens of what should be and not what people are actually dealing with on the ground. I think there are more constructive ways to address that. And I think, this is one of those things where I'm going to take that sort of Pollyanna view and say, Center for Tobacco Products has an opportunity here to demonstrate how that can be done. And I know that it's going to take Congress changing things. That falls on us just as much as it falls on the industry and the regulator and the judicial system. We're going to have to figure this out and get the law changed. At the end of the day, the big challenge that this presents, not just in terms of some of the regulations that may be undone, but now this puts a lot more work on the shoulder of legislators. Laws are going to have to be very specifically worded, which is, it's not impossible. It's just improbable that they're going to get it right in the legislature. It's why regulatory agencies exist. There is nobody should have any expectation that your elected officials are experts on all of this stuff. They're not going to be able to consider all of the angles in 2 committee hearings in each house. I don't care if you've got 6 committee hearings. I don't care if you're Hawaii. Those committees are made in Hawaii. They have like half a dozen hearings in half a dozen committees before it makes the turn into another chamber.
Hawaii always just makes my head roll.
Yeah, it's very difficult to track legislation through Hawaii. But those committees are made up of like 3 to 5 people. That small number of people are not going to be able to consider every angle and work all of those details into a bill. So,
and that's why language is left vague and again left up to a regulator to interpret. And
leave it up to the experts who have the training, they have the data in front of them. They can get the data if they need it. They have to want to get the data. So I mean, there's a human element involved in there, and politics regulators are subject to political pressure like anybody else. But it is better to have those agencies working through these things. They just have to do it in a way that's accessible and transparent to the rest of us. We have a role to play in this, and the regulators need to kind of open up the doors and windows and let us in. And you know, had they done that from the beginning, maybe we could have avoided this stuff. But you know, this has been going on for decades. This isn't a new problem. You know, this is I think this is sort of the evolution of this conversation. And who knows? I mean, you know, I think under the Trump administration there were things that were deregulated. I don't think the world caught on fire.
Some of it did.
You know, some of it did, I'm sure, but you know, deregulation is not the worst thing in the world that can happen. So I again, I've got a foot on both sides of this. I'm curious. I think that's the best anybody can approach this issue with. Some just good old fashioned curiosity. But you know, we do need to proceed with caution. We need to be aware of what's happening. This may not be the best thing for vaping. It may not be the best thing for tobacco harm reduction.
Yeah, that was kind of like what we were talking about before the stream, was like, this could end up benefiting us in a really great way, or it could end up being the opposite. The opposite could end up being true here. This, for folks who are like, oh, it can't get much worse, it might.
Yeah, and just something to keep in mind is, you know, we already know this, in a vacuum of federal regulation. So again, prohibition is not regulation. FDA, Center for Tobacco Products, has created essentially this vacuum. States and municipalities will step in. They will do things that are more severe. They do have the authority to you know, ban flavors. They can't set product standards, but they can ban flavors. They can raise the minimum legal sales age. They can do tobacco retail licensing. New York City had this several years ago. They basically thinned out the number of licenses that are available. They locked in place, you know, I think it was a matter of hundreds of vaping licenses or nicotine, I don't know what they called it, not cigarettes, versus like thousands, something like 9,000 licenses for retailers to sell cigarettes. And they just locked everything in place and then committed to dropping that in half by a certain number of years. So municipalities can do that. So in the absence of any solid federal regulation, states and municipalities will do what they think is picking up the slack, possibly implementing stricter regulations. And I don't know how far that gets in terms of, you know, the court making a final decision on those things. So yeah, it's interesting news. I'll give it that. I don't know. I think in the short term, this may be good for the industry, and it may be good for consumers. As far as nicotine and tobacco products go, we may be able to see more products on the market legally. But in the long run, I don't think this is the appropriate way to go about fixing the regulations. I think FDA has a responsibility to open up the process, be more transparent, be more engaging, consider all of the voices at all levels, the small manufacturers, the small mom and shops, small mom and pop shops, all the way up to the biggest cigarette company.
Small mom and pop shops is a tongue twister.
Yeah, it is. And of course, consumers. So
yeah, that was a long-winded explanation with so many twists and turns, but thank you.
I don't know if I successfully threaded the needle there. That was my hope. You know, I want to, just personally, I want to look at this from all angles. I'm not somebody who's just going to jump in and pick, you know, A team or B team here. I'm curious about how we move forward with this in a productive way that actually does protect people. So,
yeah.
So we have managed to eat up an hour and almost 24 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you to everybody sticking around for that. I think a lot of people right now are just kind of like me. I think a lot of folks probably here, read Jim's article and read some other tweets and things like this, and trying to piece this all together as to what's going on and what it means for us and broadly as well. And like I said before we got onto this conversation, when we do a little pre-show meeting behind the scenes before we start, and I was just like, a lot of times when I get really lost in some of this stuff, I'm like, Alex, you just run it down for me, because I'm lost. I don't know where I'm at in the middle of this. So yes, thank you for that. Yeah, he did a great job, Peggy.
I hope it was helpful.
Oh, thanks, Tom. Thank you, Tom. But yeah, that was definitely helpful, and I think I'm with you just completely on this, where I don't think this is the right way to go about it. I think it could benefit us. I think it could end up hurting us, and I think this could end up hurting Americans across the board in a lot of ways that have nothing to do with tobacco regulation or nicotine regulation and things like that. So I think it's something to be, I think it's something for all of us to just keep our eyes on, whether we're solely focused on this topic or just broad regulation in general, in the coming years. So, well, everybody,
as Apathy Miller pointed out, we'll have more news on Monday. I think, I'm not clear on the details, but yeah. So,
Janine, it's good. Your drooling is justified. Anyways, I hope that was helpful for everybody. So kind of a mix of news today. We're going to kind of leave everybody on a, hopefully this works out foot going away for this summer. And then, hopefully we're back in the fall. I definitely want to encourage everybody to still please continue to share stuff from CASAA. Continue to donate if you can. CASAA is still not out of the woods, not out of the weeds yet when it comes to our financial situation and what the future holds for us. So if you're able to donate at CASAA, please do. I'm just going to kind of muddle through the spiel here, if you don't mind. And I'm just going to start it right out with donations. And if you're able to set up a reoccurring donation, even if it's just a few bucks, please do. A few dollars every month to CASAA goes a long way, especially if everybody gets on board and does it. If you give up one morning cup of coffee and you donate that $3 to CASAA every month, it goes a long way.
I'm going to take this a different direction. I'm not going to encourage anybody to give up a cup of coffee in the morning. You need your caffeine. I'm not going to argue with you on that. But the most important thing is you quit smoking cigarettes, which are way more expensive than vaping. And for, a fraction of the cost of one of those packs of cigarettes that you would buy a month, you can make a world of difference for keeping us alive.
That's true too.
We greatly appreciate it. So, yeah.
And if you do give up that cup of coffee, come see me. I'll make you a cup. Also, if you are also interested and you want to get something back for the money you give to CASAA, you can head over and check out our merch store. A ton of awesome designs from Danielle Jones. You get to be a walking billboard of tobacco harm reduction. You get to support CASAA. You get to do all those awesome, cool things. If you're here right now, if you're one of the 110 current viewers from across the platforms that are watching and you are not currently a member of CASAA, you're doing everything wrong right out of the gate. Everything wrong. Go over to CASAA.org, become a member today, right now. You have permission to leave the stream if you have to, and go become a member today. While you're there, after you've signed up to become a member, and it's absolutely free, we don't bombard you with emails. We send you what you need to know when you need to know it so you can get involved and be the best advocate you can be. While you're there, if you haven't shared your story, your personal testimony to how these products have helped you, how you've quit smoking, all of those things, please check out the testimonial project over on our site. Share your story, use your voice. Our collective voices are the most powerful thing that we have, and your testimony is simply a big part of that. So please share that. Skip, thank you. I see the super chat there. Thank you for the $10, Skip. Much love to you. Check out CASAA on Facebook, like it says below. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's CASAA Media, at CASAA Media across the board. And on, are we CASAA Media on eSig Forum? Is it the same handle?
No, we're just CASAA.
I didn't think so.
I think we're just Kristen. Kristen's the only one who manages our eSig forum.
But everywhere else, it's at CASAA Media. So check it out, follow it, do all the things. If you're on Facebook as well, you can join your state page over on Facebook. We have a page for every state. If you're an American, there is a page for you on Facebook. You won't find me in any of them because I don't use Facebook, but I'm sure probably the vast majority of you do. So if you're not involved in the state page over there, please check it out. It's a great place to get involved too. There's a lot of smaller local stuff that we just don't simply pick up. And if you happen to hear rumblings, talk, discussion, something going on in your local town, that's a great place to share that information. So possibly we can get ahead of something and we can put it out and we can amplify that. It's a great place to get involved that way. Yeah, you are CASAA, just like it says. We all are. It's not just me and Alex up here on the screen or Kristen running these awesome bumpers right now. Everybody. Yeah, you, all of us together. Remember, guys, nothing about us without us. And again, our voices are the most powerful tool that we have. I think I did it. I think I did all the things. I don't know. Did I do all the things? I'm going to forget how to do this by the time we stream again. Grassroots AF. Thank you, Kristen.
There we
go. Anyways, I think that's it, you guys. I think we're out of here for the summer.
I'm just going to take a second to wish Janine a happy Canada Day. My family celebrates Saint Jean Baptiste, but happy Canada Day anyway.
Happy Canada Day, Janine. We're going to do, I don't know, Happy America Day next week.
Yeah.
For everybody out there, I hope you guys have for our American viewers, I hope everybody has a safe and fun 4th of July. I hope you guys have a safe and fun rest of the summer. I hope you all, stay excellent, be excellent to each other, be excellent to yourselves. And that's going to do it. We hope to see you guys in the fall. Guys and gals and everybody in between. Much love to you. We'll see you guys later. Take us away.